Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving straight into the deep end of neurodivergent relationships. We'll be unpacking a totally fascinating framework called the Avocado Manifesto. This guide is a real game changer because it completely dismantles that exhausting victim versus perpetrator narrative so many couples get trapped in. Instead, we're going to zoom way out and look at the entire system. Imagine two completely different nervous systems trying to share one single home. That's what we're exploring today. So the whole framework kicks off with this brilliantly simple metaphor, the avocado. Think about it. You look at an avocado on your counter and it looks exactly the same every single day. But the second you slice it open, you honestly never know what you're going to get. It might be perfectly ripe, or it could be hard, bruised, or just totally closed off. Well, in a relationship where ADHD is in the mix, it's exactly like that. Both partners wake up every morning hoping for the absolute best, but they literally cannot predict the day's internal weather. And this reveals a really surprising shared reality. The avocado metaphor isn't some sort of jab at the partner with ADHD. Not at all. It actually emotionally anchors us to both sides. The ADHD partner often has absolutely no idea what kind of internal chaos they're waking up to either. They're also slicing themselves open with hope every single morning. So right off the bat, we see this as a shared struggle with unpredictability, not some personal failing. This idea completely reframes the everyday friction. You aren't actually fighting each other. You're fighting a fundamental difference in inherited nervous systems. Systems that neither of you chose, by the way. It's literally a conflict of operating systems, not characters. Think Mac versus PC. Once we stop seeing this as a clash of personalities, we can finally stop asking who's at fault here and start asking the better question: what does this system actually need? Naturally, this fundamental difference creates a really profound clash of needs. The non-ADHD partner, who the manifesto calls the other, desperately needs predictability and patterns to feel safe. Makes sense, right? But here's the catch. For the partner with ADHD, the carrier, that exact same demand for predictability feels like being locked in a cage. The carrier desperately needs space and freedom from judgment just to manage a brain they didn't order. So what makes one person feel fundamentally safe is inherently threatening to the other. Section 1. Impact is not a free pass, or as it's said in Dutch, impact is geen vrijbrief. Let's get right into it. Now, understanding neurodivergence is absolutely crucial, but impact is still impact. An explanation is not a receipt. You can't just cause pain, point to your neurology, and consider the bill paid, right? The manifesto makes this super clear. Explaining your behavior is really only the first half of adulthood. The necessary second half, that's taking responsibility. It means acknowledging the impact regardless of your intent, actively repairing it, and showing visible, ongoing effort to manage it. Moving on to Section 2, Mirror 1, looking at the other. This part deeply validates the specific and honestly often entirely unseen exhaustion of the non-ADHD partner. And this brings us to a huge trap: silent bookkeeping. We've probably all kept a mental scorecard at some point, haven't we? When you're constantly adapting, absorbing the chaos, and sacrificing your own plans just to keep the peace, you inevitably start keeping a mental ledger. You don't count out loud because, well, your partner can't help it, but you're tallying up those sacrifices in silence. And the danger here? A forbidden ledger doesn't just vanish. It leaks out. It shows up as sighs, short answers, and passive resentment. The ADHD partner feels this instantly, which triggers deep shame, and boom, the cycle worsens. Over time, all this silent bookkeeping leads to a massive cumulative weight of self-loss. Think about it. Your agenda is always written in pencil, just waiting to be erased depending on your partner's mood. Your own desires start to fade away simply because that wanting muscle hasn't been used in years. You basically turn into a hypervigilant seismograph, constantly bracing for the next tremor. It gets to the point where even moments of rest feel totally unsafe. On the outside, you look strong and flexible, but quietly, you're wondering if you even exist in the relationship anymore. So how in the world do we fix this gravity problem? Often, households naturally start orbiting the ADHD partner just because they produce the most urgency and unpredictability. But the solution is not trying to make the ADHD partner lighter or smaller. Instead, it actually requires the non-ADHD partner to actively reclaim their own mass. You've got to rebuild your own life, your own friendships, your own plans. Doing that shifts the geometry of the entire relationship and, surprisingly, gives both partners much-needed room to breathe. Which brings us to a really core rule, the boundary constitution. It goes like this: I fully accept who you are.
I no longer accept what it costs me to carry that without boundaries. Setting boundaries is not a punishment. It's really not. And it's not some hardening wall that freezes the relationship either. It is a vital act of self-respect that is absolutely necessary for the relationship to survive. You can fiercely protect your own energy while still fully accepting their neurodivergence. All right, section 3, mirror 2, focusing on the carrier.
Now, we need to grant exactly the same level of dignity to the partner with ADHD, empathetically exploring their intense, invisible internal chaos. Let's actually slow down time for a second and analyze the anatomy of an outburst. Starting with the external reality. What the non-ADHD partner hears during an argument is usually a single, seemingly harsh, completely unfiltered sentence. It lands like blunt force trauma. It feels totally unpolished, and frankly, to anyone watching, it just seems really rude.
But man, the internal reality is a completely different story. Inside, it's a hand-operated mental filter desperately struggling with 10 overlapping thoughts all at the exact same time. The carrier is juggling random associations, the stress of the day, a massive fear of messing up, and a literal wave of panic. Out of that absolute storm, they force out the most direct, unpolished sentence just to be able to speak. And usually, just a fraction of a second later, they get hit with an instant, painful wave of internal regret because they know exactly how badly it just landed. So we have to ask ourselves, is this bluntness just a lack of love? The manifesto gives a huge, resounding no. It is simply a lack of packaging time in a brain that delivers everything all at once with absolutely no natural order. That blunt sentence wasn't some calculated attack on their partner. It was just an unfinished product of a completely flooded brain. And this really brings us to the exhausting mask the ADHD partner wears just to function out in the world. They spend all day at work manually regulating everything, their focus, their tone, their impulses. So when they come home, crash, and drop that mask, it can easily look to their partner like withdrawal or like they just aren't trying anymore. But for the carrier, it's the exact opposite. Coming home and dropping that mask is their deepest proof of trust. They are essentially saying, you are the only person I feel safe enough to truly land with.
Let's think about the aftermath of a conflict for a moment. When a carrier shuts down or gives this cold, indifferent silence after an argument, the other almost always reads it as apathy, like they just don't care. But the truth? It is almost always profound shame that has completely lost its vocabulary. It's a total crushing judgment of their own existence, a direct echo of a lifetime of being told they are too much. They remove themselves from the room emotionally because the shame is just way too overwhelming to process.
Section 4. 2 languages, 1 relationship. Let's bring this all together. Here is exactly why these two well-meaning partners constantly clash when trying to resolve everyday conflicts. The carrier speaks process language. When something goes wrong, they honestly attempt to share their internal process, all the overwhelm, the panic, as a genuine bid for intimacy. But the other, they are speaking effect language. They're focused entirely on the painful impact of the action. So the carrier's vulnerable explanation sounds exactly like dodging responsibility to the other. And the other's focus on impact? Well, that sounds like a relentless, unfair attack to the carrier. Okay, so here is the way out. The key of sequence. The carrier absolutely must acknowledge the effect first. They have to say, hey, I see that this hurt you and I completely own that before ever explaining their internal process. And on the flip side, the other has to learn to receive that explanation as just information, not as an excuse. Acknowledgement opens the ear, explanation without acknowledgement closes it. Just changing this one sequence completely flips the dynamic of the conversation. It's a total game changer. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Where do you currently stand in your own relationship dynamic? Whether you're the carrier or the other, are you ready to finally step out of that exhausting victim-perpetrator cycle? By applying this kind of systemic empathy, by seeing the whole board instead of just your side, you can stop fighting each other and start working together to build a home that actually honors both nervous systems. Thanks so much for learning with us today.